and the range of custodial sentences that the assize could are monitored also gives you a sense, if you go through these, it's not simply going through, just to go back, it's not simply looking at the offences, because what you want as well is, obviously, if you move up or down this to the death penalty, the more serious the perception of something like an assault, if you follow through to this, obviously the more serious assault is going to get the more serious sentence. So there's a variety of sentences. That's how they break it down from your statistical point of view if you're looking at this, okay? So just to sort of, when we're looking at the records or samples that you see there, these are the kind of information they can provide you in terms of your own local area, in terms of, you know, categorizing the kind of seriousness of the offence. If you are investigating then through the assize corpus records, what you will have when you open the box, if you like, you'll see some of the statements here, and some of in the second page, or these are some of the forms or pictures of the forms. You can see both of these are actually a Form B, which is a disposition of a witness. In other words, they're taking the witness's evidence. And you will find that in all police forces today, they will have these forms. So they have specific forms that they will take down your statement in. And they have to complete it, read it back to you and sign it. You know, you've all seen the sectomorse or whatever, okay? So they have specific forms for doing this. And this is the sort of, they will have an opening statement which is essentially the details of the nature of the offence and so on. And then they have the index of dispositions, so in other words, what's in the box, what's in your record that you're now holding, okay? So Form AA is simply, again, general information on the case, and the real meat, I suppose, of any of these things is in the statements of the witnesses. And you'll see there that the witness statements there are actually both police officers. Police officers are required to fill out a witness form just as any other witness. Okay? So they have to, if you like, do that, right? So they are actually witnesses as well. And then Form AC is the statement of the accused. And don't be surprised if that contains very little information. It usually contains a single sentence, which is, I reserve the right to my defence or whatever. Okay? So the person doesn't actually tell the police anything. Okay, so usually you will get very little on that. So you're working off of the statements of the witnesses to provide you with those kind of details. So you know, it's pretty easy to follow. You get a lot of information, and again, as I said, you get information about a specific crime. And you might be interested in that particular crime for various reasons and for your locality, but also as you look at as well, you can draw other things from it and use it not just simply in a criminal or policing history of your locality. So this is just a sort of, you know the way when you used to go to cinema before you did a short film, before you had the main sort of thing. So this was an incident of domestic violence in 1893 here in Belfast, and it was an assault on a guy called Jackson Henderson by William James and Jane Henderson, or Mrs. Jackson Henderson. Okay, and it resulted in the guy's death, and his deathbed statement was, "For some time past, my wife and myself have not been on very good terms, and she has assaulted me on several occasions." So, sort of a gift for understatement, really, not on very good terms. And resulted obviously in the death of Jackson Henderson, but the interesting thing here was that his deathbed statement was ruled inadmissible. Okay, so even though they had a lot of statements there, but why I picked this one is, again, the point is that if you were, for example, looking at a social issue like domestic violence, you could pull this out of these records. And this is a case of domestic violence against a man, although I presume that it was practically a two-way street, I'd imagine, in the Henderson household. So you could pull a lot out of it. But what the case I wanted to look at is the one that you sort of have in front of you there on the winter assizes. And basically the charge facing this woman was that Matilda Ogilvy feloniously did kill and slay a certain male child of said Matilda Ogilvy, whose name is to said jurors unknown. So the child's name is unknown to the jurors, okay? Against the peace of Our Lady, the Queen, her crown and dignity. So she faces a charge of going back to murder of an infant, okay? So this is the charge she faces in the assizes. Now, as we track the case through, you'll see that the charge changes. You'll see there's discrepancies in the dates, discrepancies in some of the statements, okay? And this always makes the kind of tracking down of things in these areas kind of problematic, because we somehow imagine that people were perhaps more careful in the past in terms of recording things, and we always end up having to sort of use our own judgment to some extent. So that's the charge she faces. And it's from the, again, form AB. You have a picture of it in front of you. Deposition of Head Constable James Diamond. So again, you can track this guy back in the service records, so you can find him and find his career. One of the problems with the Royal Irish Constabulary records is that they're sort of everywhere because of what happened. And so you have a lot of stuff in Kew, you have stuff here, and you have things in National Archives in Dublin. But you will find, as I said, the county inspectors, of course, cover these kind of events. So one of the things that he has to start is that in the presence and hearing of the defendant, so he's got to say it in front of her. Okay, he's got to formally say it. It's like arrest. The policeman has to put his hand on you. Okay, he's put his hand on you. He's not arrested you, because that is the kind of thing of confining you. So in the presence and hearing of the defendant who stands charged that on or about the 25th day of September 1893 at Hightown, part of Kilwater, County of Antrim, they did feloniously kill and murder an infant child, name unknown, child Matilda Ogilvy. So it starts on the 25th of September. You see the date bobs around, so people use different dates. So again, a serious charge, okay, for her. So he goes on, from the information received, I this day proceeded to the residence of Alexander Ogilvy at Hightown, parish of Kilwater, County of Antrim. I was present. One of the things that you will find, if the policeman has been well trained, there is no personal, or there should be no personal opinion in his statement. His statement, a police statement by an officer, is to be matters of fact. Okay? In other words, I was at such a location, on such a date, I observed, not I think, not I thought, okay, or anything like that. Okay, so I was present when the dead body of a child was dug up by Constable Joseph Keenan out of the ground in the small garden at the rear of the dwelling house. It was enclosed in a small box, a band box, which had a cord around it. It was 9 inches below the surface. I then arrested the two persons, Matilda Ogilvy and Nancy Ogilvy, on the charge of murdering the child. I gave them the usual caution. Obviously, for legal terms, for legal reasons, he has to put that into the statement that he did caution them. Okay, because if he doesn't do that, then anything they say is not admissible. Okay, sometime afterwards, in my presence, Matilda Ogilvy said. So we have the kind of basics of the incident, okay? But what's interesting there is from information received. So somebody told the police. Okay, we know somebody locally contacted the head constable or someone in the station and gave them this information. So they were proceeding after, they knew what they were potentially going to find, and they obviously went to the small garden out the back and even knew where it was. This is what James Lyman is claiming that Matilda said to him. Okay, so it was a terrible thing that I did not send for Anne Morris or Norris that day. My father asked, was the Wayne dead? My mother said it was. In this case, actually her stepmother, which you see later on, even though she's referring to this woman as her mother. And he said, you should have sent for someone. Now, interestingly here, and as we go on with the case, remember the offence of concealing the birth of an infant? She has now put her own father in the frame. Because they buried the child out the back, and she had said in her statement, according to the constable, that her father knew. And I think that's important as you see as the case goes on, because so the prisoner had no question to ask of the witness. So she didn't put any question to him. And the prisoner, until the OUI said, the child was dead born. And I was only it was only bad a quarter of an hour. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was lying dead when my stepmother came in. My stepmother lifted the child. I was that bad I could not. Again, the piece of testimony here is that the child is dead. The important thing is that she's telling the police the child is dead, so there's nothing we can do about it. And obviously then it comes back to the policeman either not believing her or having reason not to believe her. But essentially she's still admitting guilt in terms of the concealing of the birth. So it's important, and that's an important thing for the police officer to record at the time. Okay, so she is admitting, and the problem sometimes is that if a person like that doesn't know the law, they're going to say, oh, but the child is dead, not realizing that they're after admitting to something else. Okay, so because obviously in their mind, that this is the fear is that it's a murder charge. So we go on to the Joseph Keenan. Again, what he's saying is that the child has been in the ground 2 weeks. So I'm just extracting bits out of his one, which I think are interesting because, so she's charged there on or about whatever. So they reckon about, he's giving a different almost